Hello, my name is David Duncan, and I'm the CEO and proprietor of the Duncan family wines. These include Silver Oak, Twomey, Ovid Napa Valley, and Timeless Napa Valley. Today, we are at our location in the Russian River Valley at what we call Twomey West, and we're going to really dive into our Twomey Pinot Noir wines. We started Twomey in 1999 as an effort for our family to explore other varietals other than Cabernet Sauvignon, which we've been doing since '72. We're very excited today to be joined by our Twomey winemaker, Justin Hirigoyen, to really talk about our Russian River Pinot and our Anderson Valley Pinot. We are also going to be joined by the esteemed wine writer, Elaine Chukan Brown, who will be joining us today. We welcome you and hope you really enjoy what you learn today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you. We have here Twomey 2019 Anderson Valley Pinot Noir.
Cheers.
Cheers. Immediately, there's just this incredible burst of flavor. Just lights my whole head up, really like opens up my mouth and kind of makes me jump forward like I really want to taste this wine. And then just this, again, this wash of flavor. Plenty of fruit, but the fruit is almost delicate alongside this complex of sort of what I call winter forest notes and some rocky character. So tell us about, what we're tasting, the 2019 vintage and those two sites in that year.
So 2019 Anderson Valley Pinot, 2019 was a fantastic vintage in the Anderson Valley. I think the winemaking community there was really excited about it. It was something that, it's a very classic Anderson Valley Pinot. And I think, those winter forest notes, that kind of, resinous or, wooded notes are always certainly on full display in the Anderson Valley. And I think they're definitely here in 2019. And when we craft this blend, we're working with these two vineyard sites, so Monument Tree Vineyard and Behrman Bend Vineyard. And Monument Tree, as we mentioned, is a little bit more on the deep end, so kind of closer to the Pacific, a lot of that ocean influence. It has sort of a northeastern exposure, and so it's a little bit cooler, and the soil has a little more clay in it, so it does kind of retain a cooler feel than Behrman Bend, which is just a few minutes down the road, but is more southern, southwestern facing. It's a little bit more sand-based, sandstone-based in the soil, and so it comes off as very bright and deep red fruits, and it can be a little bit more approachable. And so in 2019, both those sites ripened. It wasn't a year where we struggled to ripen one or the other. We did want to pick Behrman Bend before it got over the hill, and I think we were successful in that, and that's some of the freshness that we're talking about. And then Monument Tree brings in that textural element, some of those very savory, spice-driven notes. And so hopefully, in a great vintage, all those things are, it's going to add complexity, but there will also be detail, so you can also kind of pick out those different elements. It doesn't become muddled like some vintages can, and I feel like there's a really nice precision in 2019.
David, what's your favorite thing to eat with this wine?
To me, today, tasting it, I'm getting this like cherry blossom character that's very strong in the cherry characteristic. I also think because of the balance that the wine has, like it has this wonderful long finish, mm-hmm. It just, as you said, it kind of washes over you and keeps going. I think those two things combined, my sister-in-law brought me a fresh piece of salmon last night, which I pan-fried, and I wish I had this with that, because I did not have this last night with that. But, I think the savory aspects of like cast iron, salmon is something that I think would be really wonderful. So to me, that's what's striking me right now is I was like, dang, I should have had that last night.
One of the great secrets about that pairing is you want that mouth-watering acidity and long finish, because it just keeps it cleansing the mouth and making that fish work so beautifully in the meal. And that's absolutely, I totally agree with you. This wine absolutely has this perfect pairing for that. It's a beautiful, delicious wine. And again, immediately it goes back to what you were describing. There's a little more fullness in the mouth, the shape of it is rounder, and it still has that beautiful range of kind of mixed cherries and red fruits, but there's really an incredible savory quality to this wine at the same time. And I have to say, like I was just saying, it's fuller in comparison, but again, mouth-watering acidity, really long finish. And there's also this sense of almost a creamy mouthfeel to this wine. So tell us about that. What are we tasting here?
Well, it's a great description for the Russian River Valley, which is always the highest compliment. So thank you for that. But it's that creaminess is something we're always kind of calling out when we do these side-by-side tastings, and that kind of approachability. It's always a little more broad texturally, and it has a breadth that just carries through to the finish. But that Green Valley element, that fog element really comes through in the finish, where it kind of uplifts, so it doesn't sit heavy on the palate. Which, when you're in Russian River can be a little bit warmer than Anderson Valley, and when you think about peak temps during the day, you're usually at that peak temperature for longer in the Russian River Valley. So it's not necessarily that we'll have a lower, highest temp in Anderson Valley, but the time at that temperature is a little bit lower. So in the Russian River Valley, that lends to a little more opulence in the tannin structure, and a little bit more approachability when the wine is young.
Yeah, what I love about this wine is, again, it is rounder in the mouth and it fills more of my mouth, but it also sort of hovers and floats across the palate. So there's this kind of fullness and lightness, kind of pleasurable mouthfeel, yet so much nuance. And again, there's a kind of rich layering, but incredibly long mouthfeel. So it's very much that tension and dance that you were describing. But I think sometimes if we say words like opulent or rich or full, people might think it's a big, heavy wine. This is a very nuanced, subtle, layered, mouth-watering wine that has a real sense of pleasure while also having a sense of seriousness that you can dive into. And it can be hard to find both those things together sometimes, but I really appreciate how this Russian River Valley Pinot delivers that combination.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think 2019 was a great vintage for that balance. We had these strong winter rains that really recharged the soil profile. So we had strong canopies, which meant that down the season the vines had to make a switch between growing shoots and leaves and the vegetative cycle, and then switching into the kind of reproductive cycle, which is ripening fruit. And they really did in 2019. The kind of warmer end of the season really helped push things across, and acidity was a little bit more soft in its character. It wasn't necessarily lower, but it was a softer acidity, which kind of lends that perception of elegance throughout the vintage.
So what food do you want with this wine?
I was preparing for that question, and I'm thinking, probably like a grilled bone-in pork chop. I think that, I would drink this wine with red meat, but I think, a beautifully caramelized pork chop off the grill that's just cooked perfectly, with the sort of the richness and the umami that comes out of the pork in its natural way, and a little bit of sear on the grill would pair just gorgeous with this.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. One of the things I love about our tasting today is that we're finishing with white wines. It's one of my very favorite things to do. I know you were skeptical, but hopefully you'll agree in the end that this is a brilliant move on our part. So Justin, we agree, but tell us anyway, why finish with whites?
I get to be annoyingly French for a minute. Just spending a lot of time over there, I got into the habit of doing whites last. And really, it's just a fun way to make sure you end on this kind of refreshing note, this lively finish. We're not having a meal here, but at the end of the tasting, if you do several reds, it's always nice to kind of end on this vibrant, energetic note. So I'm always a fan of ending with a nice white wine.
For me, it's a way of waking up again. Like sometimes with red wines, if I really am in love with the red, I want to reflect on it and think about it and sort of live in the glass for a while, and then the white kind of perks me back up and gets me back into conversation.
Yeah, Twomey Sauvignon Blanc is always this mix of the two counties, Napa Valley, and really Russian River Valley on the Sonoma side. And when we do sit down and, vintage after vintage, we see how these sites perform in the specific blocks within those sites. There is an inherent character that comes out, and the two counties have a role to play in that blend, and we're trying to create really a snapshot of those two areas. And it means that you can create this really complex and I think complete picture of what a California Sauvignon Blanc can be, because you have so many tools in the toolkit. Hopefully at the end of the day, if the one takeaway is that it's delicious, that's always the kind of the end result for us, or the end goal, is that there's that drinkability and versatility too, because it's a wine that I think you can have before a meal when you're cooking, you can have during the meal with that texture. It will stand up to a lot of dishes, and then you can do something like what we're doing and liven up the end of a meal or with a nightcap and send people on their way with that lifting energy.
Thank you so much for making time to taste today. It's really a pleasure to have the new releases and to get to hear more about the work you're both doing at Twomey. So cheers, thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Elaine. Really appreciate it. Justin.
Thank you.